You're listening to Speaking Of by WFSU Public Media. There have been numerous reports on immigration raids nationwide, and recently, Tallahassee saw ICE sweep through local construction sites. There have been many changes to immigration policies, leaving some with questions. Gina Jordan hears from several local authorities, advocates, and experts to find out more about what's going on with immigration.
Hi, I'm Gina Jordan, WFSU's Morning Edition host, and today we are speaking of the recent immigration raids in College Town.
When immigrants are on your top, what do you do? When immigrants are on your top, what do you do?
We are hearing the sound of a protest rally at the Capitol last week. That was a day after 100 or so people were detained around Tallahassee. You may have seen pictures of them lined up wearing zip-tie handcuffs. Many of them were pulled from a large construction site along Gaines Street across from Doak Campbell Stadium. I'm joined now by WFSU Interim News Director Regan McCarthy. Regan, you drove by that scene of people being lined up to board buses.
I did, yes. So actually earlier in the day, I'd seen some images or some videos of sort of ICE activities. It looked like some people who maybe were undocumented were being arrested. Then later in the day, I drove by the area where it seemed like some of these arrests were happening, and I really became aware of the large scale of what was happening. Mm-hmm. There were, what looked like old school buses ready to take people away, lines of people, lots of police activity.
Yeah.
We know that at least 100 people were detained.
Yeah. So you saw that, and then you heard about this rally that was happening at the Capitol the next day.
Right. I saw that on social media as well, and went there. It was happening Friday evening, and there were, I would say, more than 100 people there, a pretty big turnout on such short notice. Lots of people were there who either had parents who were immigrants themselves, and have a lot of concern about how these deportation efforts are being carried out right now.
So you talked to some of these folks that actually they're fine. They generally don't have anything to worry about, but they're there to support their family members or to support people they don't know who are in this situation.
Yeah, one person I talked to is named Ilia Litvac. He was at the protest, and he actually told me he got his citizenship a year ago. And so he personally is not really concerned about his safety, whether he might be deported, but he is concerned about what could happen to other people.
So if I were not a citizen, I wouldn't have come here. That would be dangerous, right? In light of the recent detentions and deportations, that is very dangerous, yes. And so if you put so much, of your life, and not just effort, but it's a big chunk of your life into building a life here, building a career, and then contributing to, to science or to economy, like everyone's situation is different, but contributing, right? We're not just building our lives, right? We're building the country, right? This way or that way, we are building the country, no matter our status. And so, of course, there would be way more people here if they were not essentially afraid.
That's a good point. Potentially, it could have been a larger protest, but why would someone go there if there's any chance that they're going to be arrested?
Right, exactly. And so the fact that Litvac has his citizenship, I think gave him that safety that he felt like he could go. And I should say Litvac, he's from Russia. He's been in the country for about 20 years now. He went to grad school, and he's been living in Tallahassee for 11 years. He works here at the Mag Lab. So I think his situation made him feel secure to come. But I think that people who maybe don't have citizenship are still moving through the process, don't feel as able to maybe make their voices heard in these situations.
I want to say I'm no judge to people who either cross the border without documents or come legally and then overstay, because I had the opportunity to do it the proper way, which also gave me an opportunity to build a career.
So another thing about Litvac is he's white, and so he feels like that gives him a sense of privilege here as well. He's not easily identifiable walking down the street as someone that might be racially profiled, as people are talking about could be happening in some of these deportation efforts. He feels like that gives him a sense of security, and also he feels like he is viewed by some people differently as an immigrant. He thinks there might be the expectation that he has more education or that he's a different kind of immigrant, and he believes that's also part of what gives him this ability to speak out, and that's what makes him want to be at events like this, to stand up for others who he thinks don't have that same privilege.
Yeah.
Litvac did vote this year after he got his citizenship, and so he said that was a meaningful experience for him to get to vote.
Yeah, that's nice. You also talked to one of the organizers of this protest.
Yes, Joelle Nunez helped organize the protest. She's a member of the Immigrant Rights Alliance, and her parents are actually immigrants. They also recently have gotten their citizenship. But she said she's still worried because of that idea that we just talked about, that some people feel some of this deportation effort, some of this immigration crackdown could be influenced by racial profiling.
I'm very scared that someone in my family could get arrested. I have so many family members that work on these very construction sites who are, visibly Latino, who have an accent. I worry about them all the time. My parents worry about me a lot too. I think it's not likely I'll get arrested, but it's the thing. We've seen them detain U.S. citizens and put them through the whole immigration processing process, which is really bad. These detention centers have horrible conditions.
So Nunez pointed out that one thing that's happening when we see these arrests, and we saw that here in the raid that happened in Tallahassee, is that law enforcement officers are showing up with ski masks covering their faces. In one case, one of the officers had a mask that so fully covered his face that we could only see his eyes. Mm-hmm. And I think that gives people a sense of uncertainty about what's happening. There aren't a lot of answers. There's not a lot of information forthcoming as these arrests are being made. And I think that gives people a sense of fear about whether all the rules are really being followed here and whether these arrests are happening in a fully legal manner.
It's incredibly hypocritical to use the civil process legal terms to justify taking away these people's due process, because this is anything but civil. They're being treated like criminals. They're being thrown in jails. In no other civil proceedings are you thrown into a jail, separated from your family, and not told when you're next going to be able to see them. That doesn't happen in civil court. There's nothing civil about this. And they're using the rhetoric of these people are violent criminals that need to be deported, but then hiding behind, but it's a civil procedure to deny them due process. It's incredibly hypocritical.
So one thing that I think Nunez pointed out is that this effort, these crackdowns on immigration, are really happening all over the place, right? These are led by President Donald Trump. The state of Florida and Governor Ron DeSantis have really worked to partner with Trump to make these efforts come in full force in our state. And I think that in some ways it can feel like, how can this group of protesters, this group of 100 people who've shown up to raise concerns about what's happening, really make a difference?
I do think that mass movements do have the power to change policy. They can change public opinion, and in doing so, I think there is hope in the long run that something will change and that we won't see this again.
Governor Ron DeSantis is committed to continuing these immigration crackdowns. It's part of his agenda, and again, President Donald Trump's agenda. And it's something we here at WFSU expect to continue covering.
And we will. WFSU Interim News Director Regan McCarthy, thank you.
Thanks, Gina.
Leon County Commissioner Brian Welch is weighing in on this situation. He says this kind of police action has an impact on a community. But, he says, we also have laws.
I think it's difficult when you're trying to build apartment complexes and you're trying to grow as a community and you have issues like that. I've just heard that some of the school construction sites have also been impacted in terms of workers, trying to take cover. I think that's a difficult issue. Obviously, we have a federal government, we have a state government, we have laws that have to be that people have to be bound to. So, it's a difficult situation. I sympathize with folks who may be threatened by the federal government or the immigration authorities. But at the end of the day, we have laws we have to obey those laws. And every worker in the state of Florida is supposed to go through E-Verify. Every employer in the state of Florida is supposed to ensure that the people on their sites are approved. And so I think that our certainly the construction industry and the industries that use migrant labor, whether it's the agriculture industry, they're doing their best to try and make sure that they're operating legally and all of their workers are here in the right way. And so, as local government, there's not a whole lot we can do other than to, just sympathize with the communities that are impacted and make sure we're obeying the law.
A Florida law requires private employers to use the E-Verify system. They must verify the employment eligibility of new hires, not the eligibility of existing employees. Tomas Kennedy is in charge of policy at the Florida Immigrant Coalition. He quickly took to social media to post pictures of the ICE raids in Tallahassee. He spoke with WFSU reporter Tristan Wood.
Tomas, can you walk me through a little bit how you first became aware that those raids were happening?
The way that I was alerted to them was because you're probably aware there was a U.S. born citizen that was arrested in Tallahassee by Florida Highway Patrol a couple of weeks ago and placed in an ICE hold. And I connected with the family and advocates from Tallahassee that were helping the family. That morning, some of the advocates that I had worked with in that case texted me and they said, "Hey, there's a pretty big ICE operation happening right now at a construction site in, central Tallahassee. Like, have you heard anything?" And I was like, this is the first time I'm hearing of it. So I called some people and they did make their way over there. But immediately, this person texted me back and said, "Yeah, this is happening. There's a huge militarized immigration enforcement operation happening at this construction complex." And they started sending me these videos. They themselves did not feel comfortable sharing the footage, so they asked me to share it. So I shared it on my social media and I sent it to our advocacy ecosystem, my colleagues, and obviously reporters immediately started calling me about it and sharing their own footage and my footage. And the operation was so big that and so visible and in the heart of the community that it was gonna be covered either way, right? Because again, it was just so aggressive and visible.
Can you describe a little bit like what they were seeing, what was happening at the scene?
Yeah, I mean, it was again a really, really big enforcement operation encompassing state and federal agencies. You had dozens of different police vehicles. Some of them were pretty militarized. I mean, wearing tactical military gear, fatigues, goggles, semi-auto or automatic rifles. It was again like a really, really intimidating looking operation. And then once they were able to enter the facilities and detain people, they lined them up in what appeared to be two lines. And it seemed to me in an arbitrary manner started checking the immigration status of workers at the site.
That militarized manner and kind of that like dragnet strategy of checking everyone at a work site. Is this similar to other operations that have been done around the state, or is this like an escalation, you feel?
Yeah, we've seen very targeted raids where they go in and they're looking specifically for someone, whether it's at a workplace or like at a home. But we've also seen that they go to a place of work and they start checking the immigration status of everyone there. They even do that at home place raids, right? When they target a specific someone, sometimes they get there and they say, "Hmm, let's check the status of everybody," because they're racially profiling. I will say, with this operation that we saw in Tallahassee, I think it was remarkable in terms of its location, right? Very visible in the capital city, in this like housing project next to the university. The scope in terms of how many people were detained and how arbitrary it seemed that they were checking everybody. And then also we've seen these militarized raids again in Florida, but this one was just really, really big. To me, it felt like it was them trying to send a message. I mean, it felt aggressive, big, and visible purposefully.
And then what impact, just within your network, how has that message and this raid been resonating
It's a good question. I mean, obviously, people are preoccupied and scared. A lot of reporters have asked me this: are people self-deporting? Because that's what the administration seeks with this. They want to intimidate people into self-deportation because logistically it is difficult to execute mass deportations. But no, people are not self-deporting, right? I mean, DHS is offering allegedly $1,000 to people that will self-deport. I've not seen a single person in our network or that I know take them up to that offer. Again, I think people unfortunately are just gonna power through their day by day and just take precautions, right? In terms of having a family safety plan, having a family plan in case a parent gets detained, etc. Because they have no other alternative. I mean, people have to go to work, people have to pay bills, they have to live their lives.
That was Tomas Kennedy with the Florida Immigrant Coalition speaking with Tristan Wood. The term due process keeps coming up in regards to recent immigration arrests around the country. It guarantees fair procedures and protects people from arbitrary government actions. It's found in 2 amendments of the U.S. Constitution. During a recent news conference, Governor Ron DeSantis said due process was not needed during the Tallahassee immigration raids.
If you're here and you're deported, that's considered, a civil action. Now, it is a crime to be in the state, to be in the country illegally, and you could do potentially a criminal trial to hold someone accountable. But if you're just simply removing them on the other side of the border, that does not mean the same due process that would attach to people that are brought up on criminal charges, obviously Americans, but even people that are here. It's not the same thing.
So the governor's statement is basically a fundamental misunderstanding of constitutional law.
That's immigration attorney Elizabeth Richie of Rambana and Richie in Tallahassee. Her law firm is an underwriter of WFSU Public Media.
Due process under the 14th Amendment applies to everybody, all persons within U.S. jurisdiction, not just citizens or those charged with crimes. The Supreme Court has twice reaffirmed this in cases, and even in immigration proceedings, which are civil, not criminal, individuals are entitled to certain due process protections like notice of charges, the right to a hearing, the right to legal representation at their own expense, the right to an interpreter, and the right to examine evidence. While immigration enforcement can occur without criminal charges, it cannot occur without basic procedural protections.
Florida has a new immigration law that bars undocumented immigrants from entering the state. Those who do can be charged with a felony. But a federal judge has blocked the law, and Florida has appealed that ruling. Despite the law being blocked, Attorney General James Uthmeier says he can't stop law enforcers from carrying out the law because he's not their boss. The federal judge says Uthmeier has to follow the court's order. I asked Richie about Uthmeier's assertion that he has no control over law enforcement in this matter.
When a federal judge issues an injunction regarding immigration, it's typically from a constitutional concern about due process, equal protection, or procedural violations. So the Attorney General's position about not stopping law enforcement from, quote, doing their jobs could be legally problematic if those jobs involve violating a federal court order. Courts do have broad authority to issue injunctions to prevent constitutional violations, and defying such orders could result in contempt proceedings. The proper response would be to appeal the order through appropriate legal channels, but not ignore it.
I spoke with Evan Power, chair of the Republican Party of Florida and a leader in the Leon County Party, about the Tallahassee raids and the broad crackdown on undocumented immigrants.
If you're being detained by ICE and they don't have the proper documentation, they've broken the law and they're in this country illegally. And we just had an election where people voted on that and said that they don't want these people here. And in one case that I've heard from this, it's someone who's been detained by ICE and bailed out before. They should expect this to happen. It's what the American people want. And we need to have American workers, not people who are here breaking the law.
What have you heard as far as any repercussions? We know that a number of these construction jobs essentially had to shut down because even though they said they use E-Verify, a lot of people disappeared from their sites.
Well, I think that there's probably going to be an ongoing investigation into some of those companies. But I think the thing here is we need to make sure they use E-Verify, make sure they use legal residents, and they should be on notice that if they're not, that ICE is prepared to take people and send them back from where they came. And if you're here illegally, you should report yourself and self-deport.
Could you weigh in on any potential community impact and maybe offer some advice or words of wisdom for people that are concerned about what's happening now?
Well, I think if people are concerned, they're not concerned about the laws of America. Here's the fact. We have many people here illegally that are a danger to our society. Some of them are not, but are not criminals, but they broke the law coming here. And so we need to have immigration laws enforced universally so that we can have people follow the law and come to this country legally. And if you're following the legal process to do that, you have nothing to fear. If you're here illegally, you should definitely report yourself and self-deport and try to come back legally.
I know you've heard a lot of the arguments surrounding this. Is there anything that you wish people would consider instead of just the main arguments that you tend to hear?
Well, I think everyone goes to the fact that, oh, these people are trying to earn a living. The fact is that there is a process in place for people to come to this country. We need to have people follow it because we cannot support all, millions of illegal aliens who are in this country. Some of them, as we've seen time and time again, are a danger to our society. And I think safety is what's most important for our community. And that's having a legal workforce that's earning a good wage.
That was Republican Party of Florida Chairman Evan Power. He says people who are following the legal path to being in the U.S. have nothing to fear. But attorney Elizabeth Richie says that hasn't always been the case recently.
While legally present individuals should theoretically be protected, we've seen many cases where people with valid status had been detained or targeted for removal or even removed because of administrative errors in government databases or racial profiling. We've seen confusion about complex immigration statuses, document fraud by others using similar identifying information, and even officers not properly verifying status prior to detention. Even lawful permanent residents can face removal or deportation under certain circumstances. The reality is that immigration enforcement operations can sometimes cast a really wide net, and having legal status doesn't necessarily guarantee immunity from detention or even the need to prove that status, sometimes repeatedly. My advice to clients and the public with legal status is always to carry current documentation and know their rights, because the system, even though it's designed to protect legal immigrants, does not always function perfectly in practice.
Immigration is a topic with a lot of layers, and the WFSU News team will continue covering it. I'm Gina Jordan.
Just tuning in? Check out Speaking of, the podcast version, available on all platforms.